a video on jam sponge. So this is more of a technique rather than anything kind of else. So maybe it's everybody knows how to do this, but the people I've spoken to are kind of a little bit always gobsmacked that this is how you do this, and I can't describe what I'm doing, so I'll just kind of crack on with it. So this is just a plain sponge that I've made, the 442 ratio, so 4 ounces of flour, 4 ounces of butter, 4 ounces of sugar, and 2 eggs. There's more in that, there's 5 eggs, so you can kind of scale it up. And this would also work for a pre-bought sponge as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn it into jam sponge. Difficult. If you want to make a jam sponge, you think to yourself, oh well, what you'd do is you'd put the jam on the bottom of the tray, and then you put the cake mixture on top, and then you'd bake it in the oven. The only problem with that is that the cake mixture wants to mix in with the jam. So you make the sponge you make the sponge first, and then you bake the sponge first, and then you put the jam on. You can't smear it on the top. So what you do is you do this. So we take it out, and just try it out of the way. Take the sponge off the paper. Have a look at the paper, because we're going to use this again because we don't like waste. So there can be a little bit of cake on the paper, on the baking parchment. So we're just going to use the scraper just to get off the excess bits of cake, and then we get a nicer finish by the time we've done. So those are Chef Street, so I get to eat those. And then we put the paper back in the tray. You don't have to do that, but you could just put a new bit of paper in. But I just think that's a bit of a waste. It's something else that you put in the bin. And then just normal cheap jam. Give it a mix up in the jar, because it tends to be a bit thick as this stuff. And then we're going to smear it on the bottom on the paper, and then we're going to cut the cake up into portions, and then we're going to put the cake back on top of the jam. And then what that will give us is individual portions. So we're not going to have to cut through the hot cake with that's got jam on it, and we're going to invert it as well. So at the moment the jam will be on the bottom of the cake, but we're going to turn it upside down, and then the jam will be on top. Now I can't show that bit of the video because I'll be at work. Well, it's not work. I'm doing it for something else. I call it work, but it's not work because I don't get paid. So, but I can't do it then because I'll be too busy to kind of show it. But there will be a picture in the start of the video, which is how it kind of turns out, and you'll see how you get a nice bit of jam on the top of the sponge and a square piece that's cut into portions without having to make a mess or anything like that. Also works with if you're using golden syrup or treacle or those type of things as well, or honey, any type of jam. It's the same principle. But if you're using something like honey or golden syrup or treacle or anything like that, or maple syrup, that'd be nice, although quite expensive, just make sure that you heat those things first before you pour them into the bottom of the container, and then it's just a little bit easier to work with. So you get the principle. Now the idea that there is now a layer of jam on the bottom of the baking tray, like that. I don't know if I'm teaching Grandma how to suck eggs by showing this video, like everybody knows how to do this, but I just kind of think some techniques that you use in the kitchen you can use at home, and you can just buy a cheap sponge and do this and turn it into a jam sponge with custard, and everybody would be impressed. But anyway, I'm using cheap jam. Obviously the better quality jam you use, the nicer it will be. But I tend to think that the cheap jams are class them as cooking jams. So if you're going to use them in cooking, they're fine. I wouldn't necessarily spread them on my toast. So I need, oh yeah, this is another one. So to kind of get portions out of things, it's division. So I want 15 portions out of this, so I'm going to divide it into 3 that way, and then 5 that way, and then we'll get 15 nice portions. So I'm not going to measure, I'm just going to eyeball it. That's about a third. that's about a third. Some portions a little bit bigger or smaller than others, and then just turn the board around, and then so we're going to do 4 cuts, so that's about right, and then you kind of go to the center of there, so there you kind of go, so that's half. So we judge that one, it's probably normally a little bit out, so but this one we can do by half, so we can go in half there, and then in half there. So that's a bigger portion than that, but it'll be fine. There'll be plenty of custard and everyone will be happy. Then, just a simple case of putting the cake back on top of the jam. And then when we turn it out, what is the top is going to become the bottom, so we're going to turn it out that way, and the jam will have stuck to the sponge. And not the paper, because it's baking parchment and it's non-stick. You just have to be a little bit careful when you peel it off. It just goes back into an oven to warm through. So when the cake's hot, the jam will have melted. There you go. So then we just need to put a bit of tin foil or kitchen foil on the top, nice and tight, and then that's going to be easier to kind of turn out. And also it will heat up the when we put it back in the oven, like 130 degrees, something like that, nothing too hot. When we put it back in the oven to heat up, then it will it won't dry out. The steam will be trapped by the kitchen foil, and then we can just simply turn it out, pull the paper off, and we're left with nice squares of cake that are pre-portioned, and we'll have a nice bit of jam on the top. But you'll see in the picture at the start of the thingamajig at the start of the video. But there you go. That's it. Pretty straightforward. A simple technique and quite with really good results. But there we go. Yeah. So and you can use it for anything you want. If it's sponge sponge, make sure you heat the syrup up first, and then pour it into the bottom, and then put the cake on top, just so it gets out evenly. Because like a thick syrup would just want to pool in the centre there, and then you wouldn't get any syrup around the outsides. It would just want to sit there. So if you heat it up, it becomes much more of a liquid, and then it melts, and you can put the cake on top. There we go, easy peasy.